Okay, going to work through some key points on the chart here. This held, we got to note that there's some volume down lower than that as well. We have a pretty key transition here that I think has propped everything else up, right? Coming across. And then we have a high and a high right here. So we can look at both of those. We get going right there. So we'll get the lines out. Oh. Huh. All right, a little bit of word of caution here. When you get a profile that looks like this and you've got volume on the outside, and we've already traded, there's obviously volume on either side of this. What I'm going to do is move this profile back to just the, yeah, it's not going to change it. This is a horrible profile. It's a lot of volume down at the low, a awkward distribution here, and then another distribution up at the top. When that happens, you can just pretty much scrap it. There's no reason to have it on your chart. Obviously, we've got to be worried about clearing the cluster here. So rather than making it any more complicated, I'll just put a line directly from that cluster. And that'll give us a point of reference for anything to the high side. So not much we can do when we're stuck in a range except wait. But going through this process tells us that when we break down here, we've got an opportunity to trade down at least this far, meaning we want to capture our initial risk target profit somewhere in this range. We don't want it to fall on the outside of this. Anything to the high side, this is the high of the day, so obviously we just have to get out of that if we're going to go to the top side. Okay, we have started breaching the high here. We don't have any volume outside of it, so we can't get overly excited about making any sort of a judgment call as to whether this is really a breakout, but we can start tracking it. And so it could just be that we roll over and come right back down. But if we start printing volume clusters above this, or if we have a good strong breakaway from it, then we're going to look to go long. And ideally having that long fall somewhere around the 4100 would be great, just from the standpoint of that being where the prior volume highs were. So this feels a little low. I'd like for it to be higher up than that, but hey, look at this. Now we've got volume breaking out. So let's go ahead and get our
order pending
buy order on there, and we'll just keep moving it. But again, ideally we want the long to be above the range. So if this comes right back to it right here, I don't think it's all that bad. We've got some good volume here from prior, but now we're getting a little more into the area that we want to be. We really want those orders to happen outside of the prior range. Coming back into the range is always a little bit of a nerve-wracking, is the breakout failing? I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit too so that we're not focused on the downside now. And just keep adjusting the order. Every time the CWAP upticks, we're going to go ahead and move our order up too. And again, that's, once you really get the hang of this, you understand the types of swing legs that you're looking at. It really makes it a lot easier to do this with AlgoX, because all you're doing is pushing the button once and saying, hey, just track the CWAP and stay a tick in front of it. And that way, if you're in a fast-moving market, you're not constantly trying to click the order and update it manually. But this works just fine, and it's probably the best way to get comfortable with it and really understand what you're trying to accomplish. I feel that anytime somebody's just pushing buttons on an automated interface, they tend to forget the strategy. and that's not good. So one concern I've got right now is the width of the stop. It's not excessive right now. It's still very reasonable, but you can see how much this is spreading out. And what we don't want to do is get into a situation where we end up with a huge initial risk or size off that will be problematic for us. So I'm always happier when we only have a few ticks between the entry and stop, and this looks like it's getting a little wide on us. All right, well, we've had a little action, but no pullback yet. And before we got up this high, I was talking about ideally having the entry come in at the prior highs or above. And anywhere above is fine. Anytime it's not directly on a prior transition, I want to go in and look for the transition that created the breakout, right? So let's just, while we're waiting on this, let's just follow the volume a little bit. We drive up. You can see what we drove into. The market pushes back down. Sellers try to drive through the prior buying effort. The buyers come back and lift up. Where do they lift up to? Up to the prior high. They back off, rotate down. Sellers try and drive back down through the prior buying effort. And then the buyers come in and lift again to create the breakout. From there, we have just another rotation and a solid push by the buyers. This is where the sellers come in and try to hold the market. So the buyers buy up, sellers rotate back, buyers buy up, sellers push back down, right? Then the buyers come in and initiate enough trade to carry the market higher. So this right here is a good transition. And if our order entry is anywhere near this, I feel good about it, and particularly with a stop a little bit behind it. So what I want to do while we're waiting here, and I don't know if this is going to come together or not, but I'm just going to put a profile on here and kind of see where that's falling between these periods. And you can see where the order entry is right now is right about on the point of control of this transition, the buyer, the seller, and the buyer coming back through. So if you get a little bit worried about where your entry is falling, try to follow the volume and see if you can understand. It's one thing to look at an old chart and make assumptions about it. It's another when you're watching it in real time. And if you're really going to do this for a living, it's something that you just need to be able to spot. When I'm watching the market, I'm not just like glazed over looking at the chart. I'm looking at what's happening. For example, right now we've got a battle, right? The buyers have been trying to push higher, and the sellers are trying to hold them back and push back the other direction. And so if this is the exchange that brings us back the other direction, that's great. But I can watch that in real time and really understand that there's a battle going on between the two sides, that it's not just lines on a chart, I guess, is the best way to put that. So I'm going to get this off of here because I can't really see my... Oops, that's not the one I wanted off. Let's get swing back up on there because I can't really see the CWAP with all that stuff going on, so we need to get up a tick. And now we're at 4140. Looks like maybe we're a tick in front of it. Too many ticks in front of it. But that's a good thing for you to do. This just keeps moving. It's going up and down. I'm going to get a tick in front of it because it keeps bouncing back and forth. But this is a good way for you to look at that. Well, now it's solidly down. So if you're concerned about where your entry falls, take a look at the volume that's next to it. And don't just draw a profile. Think about it. Were these buyers pushing up and then a seller countering the opposite direction? When you have that move, that's the probes going in opposite directions, it really makes it clear for you to take that as a significant battle, like we're seeing right here. Now the seller's coming in and taking control. And so those are the types of things that I'm looking for. I don't want to just, because I think you could probably pick any period on a chart and find some reason that it looks good. But if you can think about the actual process that was taking place, was it really a key transition, or was it just a move? And you know, to me, this is just a move up. This is the buyers initiating trade after the key transition. So I like where this is falling. You know, if I had to pick it on a chart before anything else happened, I would have said down here. But that's not the way it came together. Let's see if we can get filled here. We're at 41.35. Okay, going to move up another one.
Order filled.
Okay, so there is the fill. First thing let's do is get the stop adjusted so that we're not taking on any extra risk. We know where that ought to hold. Now that's falling right where we were talking about with this transition. So I'm very happy with the execution there. I think that came in a perfect place for the market to hold and see some expansion. So now what we've got to do is figure out what we're going to do with our targets. So obviously we're looking for an expansion, so they're already out there, but let's go in and do some work with the risk and reward tool here and see where things fall. So our 2-to-1 is going to be right up at the high. That's a little bit tricky. We never want to be, you know, right at the high, right on the other side of a cluster, but let's just leave it there for a minute while we make some other adjustments here to the other ones. 3-to-1 is going to be right there at 42.15, and then we've got a 5-to-1 that we're going to pull in, and that's going to come in at 42.65. All right, so we've got targets out. Let's get this off of the screen. Let's get back focused. And so the idea here is, do we take it just at 2-to-1, or do we try to get it inside inside of the clusters? You know, I think I'm willing to move it if we go up and miss and start coming back down, but we're looking for a breakout. This came in exactly where we thought it was going to come, or where we were hoping that it would come in at this transition. Let's see what happens before we start reducing. This isn't a very big stop, so if we bring this in a few ticks, we're not even getting close to a 2-to-1 return. It'll be more like a 1-to-1. So there we go. We're on it.
Target filled.
Okay, first one is filled. So the 2-to-1 works out just fine. And then now we'll see if we can keep this rallying up through the top to the next targets. Little stop improvement there.
Target filled.
Okay, 3-to-1, all good there as well. Still moving our stop a little closer. Okay, we're just a tick behind the entry on the stop. You can see what we're up against here. So we broke out, we retested the transition, which is where we got into the trade. Then we broke out again, and now we're retesting the transition. So that's why I drew this profile over here. I just wanted to see if that's what we're holding on, and it seems to be right where we're pitched up against. So. Hopefully this threshold will hold. If it's broken, I would assume that we come right back down to our entry to this same level over here. So I'm going to go ahead and put I don't want to clutter up the chart too much, but I want to put this back up so you guys can see the significance of these various reference points. The breakout here, creating the transition here. We break out again, create the transition back the other way, we break out again, and that's what we're holding on. So very predictable waves of the market when you're looking at the volume clusters. All right, well, this has been moving incredibly slow. We're starting to come through that prior transition. We're back at the CWAP. Going to see if this will hold with a, well, driving right back into the volume weighted average price. So we can hold and get another move back up, but my gut is that we're going to be coming right down to this prior transition.
Stop filled.
And that's where we are. So, nice little trade. Remember, working on a range, it didn't look like this was the direction we were going when this started. I was thinking to the downside. But it all starts by drawing out the levels that you're planning on working from. And once you have those established, it's really a simple process to determine whether or not it's valid to put on a swing profile. The swing means we're looking for the market to begin trending in one direction or the other. Now, that can happen inside of a range, but we just have to be careful to watch for our risk to reward. So I think this was a great example of a breakout, coming up, waiting for it to get out of the range, looking for the transition, seeing the volume on the other side of it, another expansion, pulling right back into that transition volume. Just everything sort of lined up perfect on that one.